There are evidence-based strategies that will keep us safer. A hearing about blue states and red states is a fiction that is being driven in this country, that somehow we have this tribalistic fight that is causing our problems, and that's not it. In fact, that is the problem. That we in this country have not understood that we belong to each other, that we share common ground.
Senator Cory Booker delivers a fiery rebuttal in the Senate Judiciary Committee, tearing apart the partisan divides and demanding real solutions to America's crime crisis. With personal stories and powerful data, he challenges the political games and calls for unity. You won't want to miss this explosive moment.
So I've been in the Senate now over 12 years. I've just never seen a hearing like this on a committee that has a track record for working together. Blue city chaos and tragedy. How the Trump administration is addressing human costs of soft crime policies. Dear God, we continue in this nation to deepen partisan divide and to undermine the truth that we share common cause, common purpose, and even common sense. In a bipartisan way, we have worked year after year to invest in the resources that keep our communities safe. And now I'm sitting in a hearing that somehow wants to pit red against blue, as if they're not Republicans and Democrats that live in every county and every state, and all of us want the same thing, which is lower crime in our communities. I may be the person in this committee that has made a decision in my life about 25, 30 years ago to move into a very high crime neighborhood. I have friends that have died by gun violence. Mentees of mine have died by gun violence. And I'm telling you right now, pitting us against each other in this false fight narrative that we don't share that common urgency and can't find common ground. This committee right now is having a hearing that is not about finding common ground and working to find solutions, but driving a false divide based upon a false pretext that somehow places that vote for one party over another are more dangerous, and that's just not true. The murder rate, this is truth data, the murder rate in states that voted for Donald Trump have actually exceeded the murder rate in the states that voted for Kamala Harris, and every year since from 2000 to 2023. Over the course of this century, the average murder rate in Trump voting states is 50% higher than in Harris voting states. Do we really want to talk about crime in that manner? Since 2000, the top 10 murder rate states have been dominated and reliably places that have voted for Republicans. The red state murder rate was 33% higher than the blue state murder rate in 2021 and 2022. 2022 was the 23rd consecutive year that murder-plagued states that voted for the president in this past election have higher rates. 8 out of 10 states that had the highest murder rate in 2022 voted for. I could go on and on and on. This is not constructive to the work we have to do. Anybody who's had the tragedy of losing people they love don't care about our partisan fights. They care about us finding solutions. And we have done that on this committee before. Donald Trump signed the First Step Act into law. Joe Biden increased COPS grants higher than any other president in the modern era. I am so exhausted by hearings like this that are far more about posturing to our political divide than trying to create common ground. Let me tell you about common ground. I've worked with some of my colleagues across the aisle to do things like surge funding. Last Congress, me and Republican colleagues on this committee introduced legislation that would establish more resources for law enforcement agencies to hire, retain, and train detectives to deal with what is a national problem, which is homicide clearance rates. There are evidence-based strategies that will keep us safer. A hearing about blue states and red states is a fiction that is being driven in this country, that somehow we have this tribalistic fight that is causing our problems, and that's not it. In fact, that is the problem. That we in this country have not understood that we belong to each other, that we share common ground, that we have common values, and that there are strategies that we could be pursuing as opposed to fighting each other. The kind of partisanship that's toxic in this nation is what we saw in the president's first act. to take criminals who beat police officers, criminals who beat them so savagely people like Brian Sicknick died, and then to pardon those police officers for particularly partisan reasons. That's unjustifiable and something that should bring us all together. The pretext for this hearing is a farce. It's belied by the evidence, it's belied by common sense, and doesn't get this committee back to the work that I've seen done constructively in Congress after Congress, despite who's president and who's in the majority. We in this committee have done the work together to make our country safer. We are seeing crime going down, but that's little satisfaction to people who have seen their families victimized by crime. We have work to do, but this ain't it.
Senator Cory Booker has served in the Senate for over 12 years and has never encountered a hearing quite like this one, particularly one on a committee that has a reputation for bipartisan cooperation. He opened his remarks by expressing frustration with the way the current hearing was unfolding. The discussion seemed to center around a false divide between red and blue states, with politicians from both sides pitting each other against one another in a narrative that didn't reflect the true shared goal, reducing crime in American communities. Booker, speaking from personal experience, pointed out that both Republican and Democratic voters alike care about one thing: lower crime rates. He shared how, decades ago, he made the decision to move into a high-crime neighborhood. Over the years, he has lost friends and meant to gun violence. He emphasized that the issue of crime and public safety transcends political lines. People suffering from the effects of violence do not care about partisan debates. What they care about is finding solutions. Instead of focusing on the issue of crime, Booker felt the hearing was being used to amplify partisan divides. He criticized the false narrative suggesting that the states voting for one political party are somehow more dangerous than those voting for the other. According to data presented by Booker, the murder rate in states that voted for Donald Trump in the 2020 election has consistently exceeded the murder rate in states that voted for Joe Biden. In fact, from 2000 to 2023, the average murder rate in Trump voting states has been 50% higher than in Biden voting states. Furthermore, 8 out of the 10 states with the highest murder rates in 2022 were ones that supported Trump in the election. Booker challenged the notion that these partisan divides have anything to do with addressing crime. He explained that the top states with the highest murder rates have been largely Republican, and this trend has continued for years. In 2021 and 2022, red states saw a 33% higher murder rate than blue states. He stressed that the focus should not be on whether a state is red or blue, but on how to reduce crime and increase safety across the board. The senator grew visibly frustrated with the hearing's lack of constructive dialogue, arguing that it wasn't contributing to solving the nation's problems. He pointed out that in the past, this committee had worked together to make tangible changes. Under the Trump administration, for instance, the First Step Act was signed into law, and under the Biden administration, funding for police officers was increased more than under any other president in recent history. Both efforts were bipartisan in nature and aimed at addressing crime, not using it as a tool for political warfare. Booker also mentioned legislation he had worked on with his Republican colleagues to provide more resources for law enforcement to tackle homicide clearance rates. He emphasized the importance of using evidence-based strategies to address the challenges law enforcement faces and reduce crime rates. Rather than continuing to engage in partisan bickering, Booker called for a unified effort to address crime and create real solutions. He decried the toxic partisanship that has taken over the nation and distracted from addressing the real issues at hand. He pointed out that partisan divides had even led to actions like the pardoning of criminals who had harmed police officers, which only served to deepen the political rift. In closing, Booker reiterated that the premise of the hearing was flawed, driven by a false narrative, and not aligned with the committee's history of working together to find solutions. While crime may be decreasing in some areas, the fight is far from over. Those who have lost loved ones to crime deserve more than partisan posturing. They deserve real action and collaboration.